No. Okay, let's start with a bit of introduction. Here we are with Hugh Angseesing, one of the, if not the most better player in VTES from now on, since 1994, right?
Yep.
1994, and the last time I saw it, you had 55 tournament winning deck archives files. So that makes you the player with most tournament won, I think, ever. So let's begin. You said at the conference at the 2013 European Championship that your favorite type of decks were the toolbox decks. So why do you consider this archetype your favorite, and which one is your favorite?
Sure. I guess I like the flexibility of a lot of the toolbox decks. So they often have like a little bit of blocky, a little bit of combat, a little bit of something else. So I like that. It means you can often use cards you wouldn't normally use. I want to put in, I don't know, what's a good example, like in the Samdi deck, that's not a toolbox deck, but the idea of putting in like Death on My Conscience, it's not a card you see very often, but you can still get some mileage out of these cards. So I really enjoy that kind of stuff. The kind of favorite style, I guess I really like the kind of the Zimisei decks, and part of that is around like a couple of cards that are really simple and help this kind of stuff. So like one of them is like Changeling, just the fact that you can have bleed or stealth off a card that's free is really useful, because it just means you can have a few of those in, and the deck can do different things when it needs to do them. And I guess the other one there is actually Plasmic Form, which is similar. Again, you've got that dodge or that stealth option. So it's just about at the right time, I can maybe do two different things. And it just means the rest of the deck can be, that's okay. I don't need to worry about combat defense so much. I can get back to my ag poke, or I can get back to getting my war ghouls, or I can get back to my, a load of intercept cards, or whatever I want to do with the other modules in the deck.
Good. And at the same conference, you said that you were trying to win with every clan on the game. And by that time, there were still 10 clans to go. How's the challenge going?
I've now run out of clans. So Samdi was the last. Thankfully, the nice Americans were like, "That's fine. You've tried it enough. Now we'll just let you let you crush us." So that was pretty challenging. So that's that was basically 2 clans a year on average there from 2013. So the last ones were harder, not unsurprisingly. When you take Dominate and All Specs and Presence out of the equation, it does get a bit harder. So you have to try some inventive things. Some of it's luck, like Blood Brothers. It's still really tricky. I know the design teams like Ben and Mike and other people have made some of these clans better, but they're still, they're not Ventru, they're not Toreador. They still require a bit more challenge, and some of that is luck at the right time.
And since you said that you have achieved the challenge, is there any clan that you consider unplayable, and why?
I would not say any clan is unplayable. I would say some of them, there are some clans that aren't designed to be played by themselves. Like, Abomination is just a handful of vampires, right? There are people in the TWDA with Abomination wins. There are, when Samdi originally came out, you had people doing different things with Harbingers and Giovanni, kind of more necromancy focused. So, that's a thing you can do. I do think out of all the clans there, excluding Abomination, I probably would say Blood Brothers are probably the hardest, because you have to have 2 minions ready for it to be effective, which means that you take a little bit more time to get going. If something goes wrong and you lose a ready minion, that can really hurt you quite a lot. Not unplayable, just more difficult, and you have to think about what you're doing. I do remember when like Lilith's Blessing was available, and the Mexico City guys, well, girls, were quite popular because you could get like 5 or 6 of them out. Maybe that's enough to do something with. But yeah, I think they're probably still the hardest out of the kind of core 13 clans. I would probably say the most difficult there, but certainly not the least popular, is probably Assamite. They really, even with cards like Loss and Black Sunrise, they still struggle to consistently oust. If you're putting in a load of Quietus and Celerity cards to try and hurt people's vampires, you're not killing their pool. So that's still quite tricky. Most of the original Camarilla clans were pretty good. Gangrel's a bit weird in the sense of that their best guys were a load of princes with Dominate and, in a circle member with Dominate. That's not them, but there's lots of other cool stuff you can do with Gangrel still.
And which vampire do you consider to be the most powerful in the game?
Yeah, I mean that's an interesting one. I would instinctively go for any vampire with an additional master phase. So Anson is probably there. Nana's really good as well. Cybele, they're just all really, really good. Backing away from that for the moment, it's probably got to be one of the original kind of inner circles. So Erika, Alexandra, Leandro, Etris is kind of okay, but my favorite is really going to be Stanislava. It's just great.
Nowadays
great.
It's useful.
Yes, yeah.
Thanks to our friends, the Emerald Legionnaires, it's really common to see Stanislavas around.
That wasn't the intent, but that's just
no,
helpful.
Yeah, well. Which is your favorite clan and vampire?
So that's an interesting question as well. I don't think I've got So just having a quick look around in my room. I've got a couple of bits of artwork up, but I don't think it helps. I think I would go for Zimisei, and I really when I first went over to Atlanta. So I think there was it was North American Championships there. White Wolf at the time was sponsoring it, and they took players who wanted on a little tour of their offices. And they had a load of artwork up or around that some of the artists sent them back then. I was desperately trying to look for a piece of artwork by an artist called David Day for Elizabeth Westcott. So she's got a Union flag on the artwork. So I was like, oh, that's cool. And she's a bit like a punky girl. She's not got the best disciplines in the world. I've never used celerity at all with vicissitude. I don't think it's needed, but she's got superior specs. It's okay. So that's probably my favorite thematic vampire. It's not the vampire to go and build the most decks around, but because I have so many Zimisei decks and I love superior specs, she's in a lot of my decks.
Cool. And you travel a lot to play VTES, so whenever you go to a new place to play VTES and you don't know anything about the meta game there, which deck do you play normally?
So I guess I have 2 decks that I probably certainly when I was traveling a lot more, played a lot around, and then in my later years I migrated onto a different one because I became older, played a bit less, a little bit lazier. So the first 2 decks, and my friend Mikkel loves the name of this deck was the Prey Punisher. So this is fantastic. The deck, you try and block your prey, you'd send them to torpor with the odd Rotchrek or whatever, and you try and bleed them out with a load of living mances and changelings. And at the time, there wasn't a lot of animism in combat around. There wasn't that much potence combat around or guns, so it was like a light combat deck. So, I mean, really toolboxy, but it generally wasn't going to get hurt itself, so it was going to be okay. And there was a lot of bleed decks around, and it was small, cheap vampires with a lot of Auspex, so you could bounce the bleeders forwards into your prey who no longer had any ready minions. It did reasonably well. It was fairly. It can almost play itself. And over the years, I've messed with it a bit, which is probably not a good idea. So when you had like loads of imbued decks around, I think I put like a couple of skin traps in initially to try and help, and then I put some liquefied immortal coils in, which were hilarious. Really expensive, but really, really good if you get them off. I then moved on to come up my second kind of deck, which I still play around a lot just because it's just so much fun, which is like I want to call it a cryptic mission deck. It's not really. It's like a Tremere deck with a load of allies in. So it's got, I think, a few Nefandi in, Gregory Winter, Ossian, that kind of thing. A few cryptic missions, some Society of Leopolds and Vampire Diseases, etc. It's got like a bit of a mix of stuff. And I find that, again, really easy to play. It doesn't have a lot of dominating. So it does struggle to kill people, but it's, again, quite cheap. And it's really good at controlling people, particularly when Villain became so popular. So no one had any build anymore. So it could survive quite well by just going, well, your minion doesn't do anything for a while. And then, I guess in more recent years, where I was playing a bit less and designing decks with less frequency, I'd wander around with kind of Ventrue anti-tribute sticks. Because again, if you've had a late night, because you've played a lot of games, or you've had a bit too much beer, it will play itself. You get Owen and Black Horse Tanner out, and off you go. You do some governs, and hopefully your prey dies. That's the plan.
Cool. Next one. What's your opinion on the new Sabbath decks, and which is your favorite?
So the idea of the decks was to try and have 4 decks that would play reasonably well out of the box and would play reasonably well together. So there's some play testing around that of how they play together. They're not all the same power level, and some of those decks are going to be harder for new players than others. I think the La Sombra deck is probably my favorite. It feels the it feels the most robust, right? Like the Torrid Anti-Tribute, I don't really like the style of deck. I've played some Embracey decks. I've probably still got one flying around, which is probably like an Eldest Curlo deck or something along those lines. But I never really liked that kind of style. I like my minions to be a bit more useful when they come out themselves. The Zimisei is kind of cool. I think it suffers from, it's tried to do, again, lots of different things, which means it can't consistently block or stop people straight out of the box. Sometimes it will have the stuff it needs, sometimes it won't. So I think that's probably where I'd go. I mean, the Tremor Anti-Tribute, I mean, that's probably almost as standard. You could take that or 2 copies of it, and you've got like a reasonably solid tournament deck if you wanted to have a go with it. It's kind of fun as well. I mean, the Nefandi are just fun.
And do you think that you could win a tournament with any of them straight out of the box?
I think someone might have won a tournament with 2 of them two La Sombra ones put together. I remember reading that online recently, but I've not seen it. I think straight out of the box, yes. I think hard, but not impossible. I think probably the Tirantry or the La Sombra would be best. And again, doubled up. So take 2 of them, pull them apart a bit. I guess that's part of the idea, is that they should be reasonably good to go. They don't need to be like ridiculously strong, but they need to be if you're playing this for the first couple of times, you feel like you can do stuff, right? There's nothing like VTES is a complicated game, and depending on what you've played before, if you've got some cards in front of you and you try to do stuff and you can never do stuff and you never feel like you're hurting your prey, or it doesn't even have to be that, right? Like I've got some friends that I play VTES with, and one of the guys, Lee, he likes building decks with on average I would say about 6 disciplines in. He loves particularly like Ravenos with some Auspex in and some Obfuscate in, as well as like the clan disciplines and maybe some Dominate as well. And they're not anarchs, they're just like a load of 6 cat pluses that've got random disciplines so not all of his vampires work for everything. But he likes doing that kind of stuff, right? So some of the excitement of this game is not that you necessarily kill your prey, but it's like, well, I want to do this thing here, and then I can use this weird card as well, and this card you've never seen, and I put this all together, and if it works, it does something a bit cool, and that's kind of what you can do. So as long as you can either do a cool thing or hurt your prey, then you're having a good time, hopefully. The sweet spot's when you can do both.
And what qualities does a good player need to have, in your opinion?
Some good humor. That's probably the first one. Because things don't always work out, right? So sometimes you sit down and you've got like a really bad draw, and your predator's using like Weenie Dem and has 4 minions out in turn 5, and turn 6 you're dead, and that just happens. Or you, I think I've played 2 games, maybe 3 games in tournaments where I had no actions. Like one of them I remember really well because I was like, yeah, I've got Marcus Vital out with a Zilla's Valley. I've got him out really, really quickly. And what does my predator do? My predator does like a Jake Washington first turn, a Horatio first turn, a Warghoul second turn. Marcus Vital doesn't get to do any actions because there am I with some obediences going, these aren't going to work because these are not the cards I'm looking for. So yeah, some good humor is definitely a thing. I think good players have lots of different skills. Like there are some really good players who are really about convincing the table in subtle ways to do what they want. So I either don't oust me, or my prey's a threat, or this thing over here needs to be done. There's lots of players who are really good at that. There are other players who are really good at just being quiet and thinking really strategically about when they need to do stuff. So there was a Swedish player called Eric Torstensson, who's probably the best player I've seen, certainly at that skill. So he could just read stuff, know when to do stuff, and he would do it at the time that seemed perfect. And I'm sure there's some luck in there as well, but there's just so much skill at reading a table, reading a situation, and reading players. So I mean that's another skill, reading players. Some players are really good at that, some aren't so good. You don't have to be good at that, but it really helps, right? If you can tell that somebody is bluffing, they've left that superior dominate guy untapped, but you look at them and there's like a little bead of sweat on their eyebrow or whatever, then you know that now's maybe the time to strike. So those are like some of the good skills you can get. I think the best players combine bits of those in different ways, right? I mean, it's if it's patience or reading a table or reading players, there's definitely elements of that. The deck construction one has changed a lot, right? So if we go back to 1994, like my first deck was some Nosferatu, a couple of Malkavians, and Roman Alexander as well, because he had animalism, and I've only got 11 vampires in the crypt otherwise. So yeah, I mean, deck construction's changed a lot in 25 years, and I don't think it really started getting where we've got now until like maybe the mid 2000s. So decks getting slimmed down to 80 or 70 cards, decks being really dedicated, the kind of the ratio of, well, if I want this vampire out this turn, these are how many crypt acceleration cards I need and this many cards. That kind of stuff turns up later. So deck construction is important, but I don't think it's that important, because I mean, if you look at this UWDA, and there'll be some amazing decks in there. There'll be like this AAA deck that should be there. That's an amazing version, and this person's added these cards to it. That's great. But if you look at some of the other decks that are in there, they're awful. And so it isn't the decks that have necessarily got that player the win. It will be the player and the I guess the fifth thing, if you like. So after a bit of deck construction, after a bit of patience, after a bit of reading the table and reading people, is a bit of a luck, right? And you can't bottle that unless you believe in unicorns and leprechauns. It's really hard to bottle, but luck is important.
It is. And how would your perfect vampire would be?
Well, I've already got at least a few perfect vampires, like Stanislava. That is a classic vampire for me. So good. I would like some 6-cap Zimseis with superior specs. Well, actually, no. Well, why am I holding it out at all specs, right? Superior dominate, superior animism, superior vicissitude. If I could have 3 of those with good specials, I can make a really good deck. I mean, I don't need. That's fine. 3's enough. Ideally in group 3, just so I can have them with other people I might want as well.
What advice would you give to people who start to play now?
Try and find a theme or something you want to do. So, like, if you're a big board game player or a big role player, like a World of Darkness, or a big card game player, try and think about what you want to do. So, if you're a big role player of the World of Darkness stuff, you normally come in with, this is my favorite clan, this is what I want to try and do, this is what this clan does. So if you as a role player, you come in and you play Tremere, you try and use a lot of thaumaturgy, which is unfortunate because that's not necessarily the best discipline, but you'll try and use a lot of thaumaturgy, and that's great. That's what I would actually suggest you do, right? Because you're learning about what does your stuff do, what do your cards do, and you'll use stuff that people don't use a lot because it's maybe not so great, or it's not dominate, or it's not presence, or all these other stuff, and you'll use stuff and you'll have a bit of fun with that. And that's probably much more interesting, because if you do that and you have a bit of fun, you get engaged with the game, you're probably going to try other stuff. If you are just going to try and master games, so this is again delving a bit back into history. So there was a period of VTES where there was a group called the Swiss Academy. I think really the only one who's still really flying around is Ruben Feldman, who is an amazing player, but you had his brother and like a few others, but they were, I think they were World of Warcraft players originally, as in the card game. I think they were a card game. I can't actually remember exactly, but they were playing another CCG beforehand at a pretty high level, and they wanted to. I don't know exactly. I mean, like, I was younger, and there's been a few late nights since, but they wanted to do really well at VTES, so they came in and they took a load of really good decks and they built them and just played those decks, more or less. And they got really good with those decks, and they were really good. Like, one of them was like the Shambling Horde deck. There was the Imbued deck when Edge Explosion was still available, all this kind of stuff. And they were really, really good. And yeah, I mean, it was just great to see. But what happened? So I guess one of them was the group, I think, eventually fell apart for different reasons, but they never managed. So they a couple of them kept getting in like European Championship finals. They never managed to win one of the finals. So part of the reason they managed to win the day 1 final and the last chance qualifier final, so the Friday, Saturday, but the Sunday, there seemed to be like they didn't adapt their playing style. So they were really dedicated to winning. They were playing really good decks. They really understood how their decks worked. They potentially understood how other decks worked that were other tier quality decks or decks they saw, but they didn't necessarily understand the game because they got into the game in a slightly strange way. So it meant if you were playing something weird that they'd not seen before, they didn't necessarily understand how to react to it immediately. They understood the mechanics and how the game should work, but they didn't understand why you'd be playing something that looked suboptimal. And the thing that I think was hurting them on the Sunday tournaments is that and this was certainly true back in like the mid 2000s of the EC tournaments, you had like a load of players turn up, like 120 players, and the reason why you'd cut down players from each round was by the time you got to day two, if you like, you ended up with 40 really good players. That was the idea. And some of the players in this group, they'd learned how to, they were very good at manipulating tables. I was going to say manipulating players. It's probably a bit unfair. They were really, really good at manipulating entire tables for them to just work out how they wanted. They were very, very good players technically as well, but that was a skill they had in spades, which is a terrible saying. They had a skill they had in spades. They had loads and loads of that. They were really, really good at manipulating tables. And it seemed to be that when they got to a final table on like a day two environment where they were playing 4 other players who were all probably quite good at manipulating tables to differing degrees, they would struggle a bit more to manipulate that table. So they were then falling back more on the quality of the deck. So I think if you're coming into the game, it depends why you're coming into the game, right? So if you're coming in from an RPG background, you go play your clan or the thing that interests you the most. You learn more about the game. If you want to come in and you want to win, and you take that approach, I think you'll not necessarily get as much out of the game, right? So you might do really well. You might win the game a lot. So some of these players were really good. As I said, I think only Ruben still really plays. I don't even think he plays that much, but he's still around a bit. And when he was playing, he helped set up the Irish play group and got those guys re-going again. But when he left, and it kind of, he was such a strong character, he kept people playing around him. So I think it really depends what you want out of the game, is what I'm saying. That's a really long-winded way of saying it. But I think you get more engagement and joy. So I started from a bit of a role-play background and a bit of, I was playing Spellflyer and Magic. I need a better game to play, particularly for Spellflyer. Spellflyer is a really bad card game. So I needed something else that was better. So we started playing this, and we all get into our favorite things. This is what we like to be. I ended up being the gangrel guy, not just because of Roman Alexander, who was the only vampire I had at the time, but because eco-terrorist, that really is down. I really believe in that kind of stuff. I don't believe in blowing up ExxonMobil or whatever, but at the time it felt like really down with my kind of green credentials, and I'm so young and a hipster and all this kind of stuff. Not hipster, hippie. I was more of a hippie. Goth,
yeah, by
really.
the time, yeah, probably.
Yeah. But back in the 1960s.
So, which was the most exciting final that you have ever played?
Yeah, I don't. Well, I think I'm supposed to say the EC final, where they won the EC final. That was really exciting. It was quite good fun, and it's nice when you bring up a random primogen or a random person with one vote who can affect a weird cross-table reversal of fortune. That was really good fun. But that's definitely not my most exciting final. I still remember this one. So it was a deck I borrowed, and it was a guy called David Litwin, who's a great friend, and a long-term Battlestar Galactica and Terraforming Mars partner. But he's got this obsession with Truja. So he loves Truja, and he's tried building every. Well, I say every. I'm sure there's still some available to him. But he's tried building so many different types of decks with Truja. And on at Origins, so you have a week worth of tournaments. So your and so there are 2 tournaments on some of the days with the weeknights as well. You're potentially playing, I don't know, 12, 13 games of VTES. So you play a load of stuff. By the time you get towards the end of the week, so your day 2 is on the Saturday, so the Sunday it used to be like a first chance qualifier event, and they still have the event there. And there's one year there where David was like, you can use this deck, I'll use this deck. So I borrowed one of his decks, and it's a Trujar vote deck. I was like, okay, this sounds fun. So you're only playing 2 rounds and then a final, so you only need to do well in 1 round. So I did quite well in 1 round, got through to the final, and I'm sat down. So I've got Norm Brown as my prey, and I can't remember exactly what he's using, but I'm going to assume it's some kind of weird Anarch stuff. There's somebody cross table who I kind of forget, and there's somebody else cross table who I also briefly forget for this moment. I've got it written down. I have like a book where people write stuff, and as my predator, I've got Adam Hulse using like a animism deck with people like Stick in there and stuff like that. And either Norm was playing them or one of the other 2 players across the table are playing some Outer Revolts. So that there's some Outer Revolts going on. And I've got Trujar person out. I have Bernard the Scourge out. And I think, is it Reginald, who's the 4-cap Primogen with superior presence? I have those 3 guys out. And Adam behind me has Stick with a Raven Spy on. I think he's getting a bit bashed up, a bit beaten up. And Stick at some point goes Anarch. And then it comes around, and I think Norm's about to die, so maybe some of the Outer Revolts are in other places on the table as well, actually, rather than just being there. And it comes down to where I'm about to get 1 prey, and I'm looking at my next 2 preys, and they're pretty beaten up. And the only thing that's really the worry is Adam, who's got Stick with a Raven Spy. And when you're playing Obteneration with a bit of presence, stealth, it's not amazing. And you've got a little bit of Temporis in there. But I'm like, Stick, ooh, I've got Bernard the Scourge. Ooh, you can finally use this weird special to burn a small vampire. And the hilarious thing was, I was going to use Bernard the Scourge. I'm like, oh, but I might need the stealth. And he's only got basic presence. He can't use the perfect paragon I've got in my hand. I'm like, oh, I can do that with Reginald. Oh, but he can't do the special vote. And it's like, I've got this banishment. Reginald's a 4-cap, banishing a 3-cap. That's not supposed to happen in the game. But it was... But because of that weird set of events where you've got these 2 weird actions that you can do to hurt a 3-cap who's got a Raven Spy who's an Anarch, it just really sticks in my memory. And that's my Trujar TWDA win. It was really funny at the time. Adam was not amused, actually, in fairness. He was like, this is ridiculous. But it was, I think I can't remember exactly why he was in so much of a pickle. I think his predator must have hurt him a bit. So he wasn't necessarily going to try and block or stop me anyway, but it was fitting at the time to get rid of Stick. So it was a really good final and just quite a lot of fun.
And now the evil question. What do you think? Question? Yeah. What do you think about the imbued?
Oh, right. So I have played imbued. I've played, one of the kind of bleedy variants. Post Edge Explosion going. So I was a clean player. I was not one of the problem children. And I've played a couple of Talbot's Chainsaw variants as well. So Johannes Walsh introduced me to Talbot's Chainsaw variant, where you have half imbued, half Giovanni with like Ty Cooper or the other race, Ambrosius the Throne. That's him. So you have the Talbot's Chainsaw out, and it does damage to the race rather than imbued. And I've also got just a straightforward, here's a load of imbued with the Talbot's Chainsaw. So I do quite enjoy that. I like them. In terms of what they try to do. My biggest issue with them is how they interact with the rest of the game. So imbued themselves don't interact that well, right? You can't disarm them, you can't taste them, you can't decapitate them. There's a lot of cards that don't functionally work properly with them, like Haven Uncovered. Yes, okay, a Haven's where a vampire lives, but if you knew where a hunter lived, you could nip round his house when he's sleeping at night and just gas him or whatever. That doesn't sound very nice, but you could go and assassinate the vampire hunter, right? You could do whatever you wanted to do them. So there's some stuff that should work or work in different ways that just doesn't work. My biggest concern isn't actually them. It's I guess it's what they're played with, right? So some of the events are really problematic. So things like unmasking are potentially too strong, but it's more or less maybe okay. Some of the other ones you don't see too often, like Fall of the Camarilla, Fall of the Sabbat, you need so many, it doesn't really become a problem. Recall to Heart's Blood. Was it Recall to the Founder?
Yeah, Recall to the Founder.
That's kind of okay. It's really just I think the two that I consider most annoying with them are Nightmare Upon Nightmares. It's just painful because it takes up a lot of time if it's in play to do it properly, and people have to make choices and decisions. And the other one is Veil of Darkness, which is just horrendous.
I hate that one.
Yeah, you see it a lot with them. You don't see it all the time. So I think I'm far more comfortable with imbued decks that are running just as imbued decks. So I'm happy with the Doctor and the FBI, the Unmasking and the Dragonbound. I think those are all cards that function okay with them. And as I said, Unmasking might be too good just because it's always there, but it's like it's not that bad either. I think the real issue is when people start using them with things like Veil as well. Veil's just a very disruptive card. And the problems of trying to wind back to, you should have shown this, you've only got masters in your hand now, all this kind of stuff, it's just it's a bit painful. So it just slows the game down. And I think so I was watching I think one of the tournaments at Origins as well, and someone was playing an imbued deck, and it was a 4-player table, and their cross-table buddy was getting rushed into torpor, and there was basically nothing the imbued deck could do. The imbued deck wasn't necessarily going to die or have a problem itself, but its cross-table buddy was going to die, and they just couldn't do anything useful to help. That's kind of a shame. I mean, that's a choice when you play imbued that you're not going to be able to do that. But I do feel it's a bit of a shame about the game and how they interact with it. I don't know. I've never really talked to kind of LSJ about this. I don't know if his plan was to do more stuff that made them interact more. I think I don't know if he had other ideas or if this was just like here's the 60 card set I'm going to do, and then he backed away from doing other stuff if he had those ideas, because the reaction from the player base is really mixed, right? You've got some people who really, really love playing imbued because they find them interesting. They ally decks have always been quite popular anyway. And they're just a variant of that. So I don't know. They're just complicated is what I'd say, particularly for new players. I've only got one imbued deck built at the moment. I don't think I really have enough cards for two actually. And I carry around the 5 rule cards in that box just in case. Whereas it's
necessary to bring them.
Because I sometimes forget, the pillar face, you get to take the equipment as well, all this kind of stuff. It's just sometimes you forget things. And for players who've never seen them before, particularly now, so we've had a lot of, with the starters, we've had a lot of players either rejoin the game or come straight new into the game. And things like imbued are just quite difficult for them to pick up or see. You don't see them very often, and imbued players are really polite about it. But you often find, and I did see this at the couple of tournaments where I saw imbued at Origins, where you'll have a player go, "Oh, I've never seen them before. I've not seen them for this long. How does it work?" And you'll have another player at the table go, "Oh, they just need to die," or you often you get that negative play experience. So as someone who's not seen them before, you see them land, the other players at the table will give you a negative view about this thing, which I understand why that is, but that again actually just makes it like if you always saw. Yeah, I guess you get it with other things as well, right? You see a Rika or Leandro hit the table, or maybe an Anson AAA deck or whatever. You see those hit the table, or a Weenie Dem, and if you're a new player and you go, I've not seen this or something like that, you might get told, oh, Rika just needs to die, blah 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 blah. So you do get that with other things as well. I think it's probably actually more justified against the other things because Rika is ridiculous. She's really, really good. Leandro is another card that doesn't quite work as intended, just because of when you're making the choice, and there's a whole set of like rulings around you have to make a choice. So if you forget to make a choice, you then make a choice in your influence phase, and you're not allowed to be penalized for. So if you could not afford to make the choice in your untap phase, fine, but otherwise unlock phase even. Otherwise you have to make that choice. So if you had to pool in your untap phase, but you get to your influence phase, you're allowed to then make that choice retrospectively and stuff like that. So it's like there are cards like that which are annoying and imbued. I think for a lot of players fall into that category. I don't have any problems when I see them over here because the players in the UK who use them, I mean, most of them don't really play so much anymore, but it's the same players who really enjoyed playing them, and you understood what they're trying to do. They're all trying to do slightly different things with them, which was pretty cool. There's like one guy who's doing like a really fairly heavy intercept stuff. There's a couple of different combat rushy things. It's all quite interesting. So it's kind of okay. What a terrible question. Horrible.
Yeah, that was the evil one. The rest are nice. What has changed the most in VTES since you start playing? And is there something that you miss?
So when I started playing, I was playing this little game shop in Cheltenham. I kind of forget what it's called now because I was 12. It was a really long time ago, and there wasn't really any structure to it. You'd turn up on whichever day you normally turned up, and you'd have like 7 players. You'd play a 7-player game. So that was like a thing that was common, playing really random sized games of VTES. You wouldn't necessarily play a timed game, and your library could be like 130 cards because that's better, right? More cards in your library is better. You still play 12-card crypt or something of that order, but 120 cards in your library, yeah, it made no sense. So that's definitely a big change. That things have become more structured, more focused, and some of that is just the game's developed. So the core bits of the game that Richard Garfield did, which are amazing, like how the game interacts as a 4 or 5 player game. So that predator-prey relationship, I think, is really powerful. The other thing I really like is your pool. That being, you need that to be alive, but you also need that to go and do stuff with either minions or with bits of equipment or locations or whatever. I really like those 2 things. They're fantastic. I quite like the mix of disciplines in the base game. I think one of the things that's a bit weird as the game's kind of grown is how many. So like a lot of games have a pocket space of these are like Magic's got 5 colors. The original concept was the colors did different things. I know over time they've blended that out, right? They've made you've got some healing stuff in some other colors, etc. Right? Some damage in other colors other than red, and so on. And VTES, there's always been an encouragement not to blend the disciplines too much. So you do have some intercept in some other disciplines. Like celerity can get some painful intercept. Celerity can get some painful, expensive stealth and so on. But you try not to blend them too much. But as you've grown with the number of disciplines available, particularly when you added the Bloodlines disciplines, you've probably, you've added a lot of complexity. So one of the things that was probably most interesting about like Bloodlines, the first set, is how, I guess, when Scott and whoever worked with them on that, when they were developing that, they've tried to, make really interesting things happen. So you've got, Spirit Marionette is, that's a really cool concept of a card. You've got all these kind of things that have grown. The original base set back in 1994, there are some interesting cards in there that do really cool stuff. But the set was really big, so getting some of these rares, and they're all rares at the time, was difficult. So like Immortal Grapple was a rare, so fighting was difficult. People would have combat ends, and it'd be hard for you to counter that. Freak Drive was a rare, so multi-acting didn't really happen very much. Magic of the Smith was a rare. Well, I mean, I guess it still was when it was last in a booster, but there's more of them flying around now, right? So it made it hard to do some of these more interesting things. So you default to, if you're playing Presence, Majesty was a free card that it was just all over the place. So that's changed a lot. The power curve of some of the cards, some of the most powerful cards are in the base set by quite a long way, like Deflection, Govern, Conditioning. Some of them have been changed deliberately because they were too powerful. Majesty was probably one of the most powerful cards. I mean, like Earthmelt does the same thing now, but it's for a very narrow subset of clans and disciplines. Protean versus Presence. Presence comes with all these other cards that you're either going to vote or bleed. So a tap is really powerful there. Protean is less powerful having Earthmelt. It's still a great card, and there's lots of cool stuff you can do with it, but it's a lot less powerful. So I think the biggest thing is a lot of cards have been changed, I'm going to say fixed. I'm clearly on that view of things, like getting rid of hostile takeover. You could hostile takeover anybody. That's ridiculous. The Majesty fix that was as a free card with as I said. Available to 2 clans at the time, well, 3 clans. Sorry, always forget about Ventru having Presence. Available to 3 clans that had bleed disciplines and vote disciplines. So it was a really, really powerful thing. And there wasn't that much intercept around. So I think that's like the biggest thing is like changing some of the cards over that time to try and keep that envelope. There are still some cards that are far more powerful than others. Some cards that arguably should never have been printed or didn't really need to exist, but I think how things are structured, both in players, how they're designing decks, and I think a lot of this was like Scott saying that kind of baseline of these are how we should design cards. These are what we need. The original set had lots of great ideas in, and is a lot of the cards in there are really balanced, despite there being lots of really powerful cards as well. But I think things have been much more focused around this is what I'm trying to do, this is what we want to try and do. So a lot of Ben and Mike's philosophy is around there's a hole here. So if you look at the cards they've added for some of the independents and some of the bloodlines, it's like here's let's look at what let's take Thanatosis. This is what Thanatosis does, this is what Thanatosis needs. So you end up getting Reaper added, and it's I had somebody complain to me, oh, that's really good. It's like, well, it's a psych that costs 1 blood or telepathic tracking, or how you want to phrase it. It's needed for if you want to do Thanatosis combat, you kind of need something like that. So I think a lot of things have changed over those 25 years. I think the most prevalent stuff really is how people think about the game. So there's a lot more in-depth maths. There's people looking at stuff around this is what's missing, this is what's needed, and that's then come through in how people design decks and how people design cards. It's far more structured, orderly. It's not always perfect still, but it feels like there's a lot more process and why we're doing the stuff. I think that's quite powerful. So it feels like there's a destination rather than just we got there accidentally. So when I look at, so not the base game, but I look at like Dark Sovereigns and Ancient Hearts, they're the opposite way around. So there's some great cards in those sets. Like I'm now really struggling, but Spiritual Intervention, Temptation, they're really good cards. Eureka's in there. Eureka's at one end of the power curve, but you've got like a Eureka in there, and then you've got the 6-cap Ventru who does the weird Golcondery thing that's rubbish. And you've got like not Regina Giovanni. You've got there's Patricia Giovanni, who's the one who's got, I want to say, thaumaturgy, necromancy, something like that, and something else. And it's like, you've got to be kidding me. That's just rubbish. So there's a real weird power level curve that gets broken at Dark Sovereigns and Ancient Hearts, where you've got some really powerful cards. Well, Banishment was probably the most ridiculous card originally, and the fact you could banish, a Smudge the Ignored could banish Eureka, that doesn't really feel appropriate. But there was some really, it's almost like they weren't designing cards; they just had like some ideas they threw together. I do feel that. I think it's got a lot better since. I think when White Wolf brought the game back, they really thought a lot about what they wanted to do, how they wanted to get there. There was some stuff that would be nice if they'd managed to change back then, like merging your anti-tribute clans back in with your Camarilla clans would have been nice. Like, why have you got 2 Nosferatu clans? It's kind of irritating, but there are bigger problems in the world.
And the last one. What aspect of VTES called your attention so much that you decided to start playing?
Right. Yeah. That's... I guess I have to go back and really think. So I had this friend called Roland. So we called him Ratty because in the UK there was a kids TV show that had a rat on it called Roland, so therefore he was called Ratty. And we were playing Magic together. We were playing just from like a couple of revised starters. We didn't have any amazing cards in those. We played a lot of Spellfire, which I don't really want to talk about, if that's okay. It's embarrassing. We'd played some of the Wars of Darkness, Vampire. Not a lot, because we were young. So he was like a year older than me. So he was 13, I was 12. We had a load of similar friends, 12, 13, all getting into the, like most of us were into the slightly alternative music scene. So like, not washing a lot, wearing a lot of black. That was kind of us.
Yeah.
still is to a degree. And the first thing was really, instead of playing 2 players sat over there in one corner and 2 players sat over there, we could play like 4 players as a group, and we could have some chat. And at that stage, one of the guys was really keen on smoking some stuff, so he liked to be able to chat to us as we were smoking, that kind of stuff. We could have it became like a social thing. So that was really the first aspect was the fact that it's probably the most social game I've ever played. Like I think I've alluded to it before. Like I play like a lot of Battlestar Galactica, a lot of Terraforming Mars with the kind of like a group of players I play a lot of these games with, and that is half because of the social nature of the game. Because you're playing with the same players, you get to have like a bit of a chat, and then some funny stuff happens, and it's kind of cool. And Vampire is very much the same for me. It's like the people you play with, and you bring up something cool, and your prey brings up your rock paper scissors equivalent, and your face just goes. So I really enjoyed that. In terms of the actual kind of design of the game, so as I said, when I first got into the game, I was very especially into my dark, moody stage. Like a preteen, grumpy, moody, bit gothy. So like the cards are all black bordered. It's like, yeah, metal, gothy, really good. So that kind of kept me hanging around. And when I think about like the Sabat stuff, so if you can see behind me, I've got like Crusade Detroit with like a chainsaw on. I really love that kind of artwork. And over here, like Sacrament of Carnage. So it's the same kind of thing. So I really like that kind of. A lot of the artwork is just it really draws you in because it's beautiful. It's kind of it's evocative. It's got a lot of passion and emotion in there. Whereas a lot of the just flipping back to Spellfire and Magic a bit. So a lot of the Spellfire artwork was artwork that TSR had used for other bits. So like if you had like some Dark Suns characters, you had Dark Suns artwork from roleplay books, art online, etc. So it wasn't necessarily produced for the game. So some of it didn't look right on a card, if that makes sense. Whereas all these pieces of artwork are done deliberately for a card game. You're trying to set up a universal feel of how you want that card game to look. And that doesn't always work. I mean, the game is mainly supposed to be dark and moody. Some of the cards don't always fit that, but that's the intent, right? So I think that's like another thing is like how things looked then. They looked cool. They looked exciting. There's a reasonable amount of, wow, actually there wasn't any blood on cards that I can think of back on Jihad, but a lot of the cards felt like they were cool and doing really cool stuff. And like you look at like Renegade Guru as an example, like the original one, you've got this werewolf smoking a cigar. Isn't that cool? I mean, it's. I'm not saying that smoking isn't cool, kids, but it felt cool at that stage, right? It felt evocative. There's a lot of emotion and passion had gone into that game, getting the kind of setting right. And when I talk to other people now, that there is another game which a lot of people mention as having that same kind of feel about the cards, and that's Rage. So the game, again, isn't necessarily the best game in terms of mechanics and things like that, but the artwork was amazing. You've got a lot of Brian LeBlanc artwork, a lot of Ron Spencer artwork, a lot of I think like Richard Kane Ferguson. You've got a lot of this artwork where you try again get this wall of darkness out there. This is what we're trying to portray. You've got all these big ass violent combat cards that look really cool. You've got a bit of humor in there. They've really tried to put their stamp on this is how we want the game to look. This is what we're trying to get across. And when I was the right age, that was what interested me the most, right? So I'm still interested in the theme now. So like when I go and buy board games or other games, how the game looks is really important to me. So if the game's got the best mechanics in the world and it just looks like an old school draft set or a chess box, I'm going to be less interested in it. I want something to say, this is me, this is what my branding is, this is why you should play me. Look at me, how cool. It doesn't have to be cool, but this is what I'm trying to go for, right? So like another set of games I've bought, I really like. There's a load of games called there's like Raiders of the North Sea, Shipwrights of the North Sea. So there's a New Zealand board game designer called can't remember his name now. Shem. I want to say because his company's called like Garfield Games, which is like his and his brother's names or something like that. But he uses the same artist for a set of 3 games. So there's like a trilogy of games, and he uses the same artist. So I feel like even though the games are doing different things, there's a connection. He's trying to build a world. It's all about this kind of world building of, look, they're connected. You can do this cool stuff. I really enjoy that. That's the kind of thing that I like.
Okay, that's been everything.
Brilliant. Yeah, thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks for your time. I know you are really busy nowadays. So if you want to say something at the end.
Oh, yeah. Well, thank you very much to both people who listened to my recording. So I hope you enjoy it. I apologize if I rambled too much. I'm always up for answering questions. So really easy to get hold of on Facebook or anything like that. If there's stuff you want to know more or get into detail around. I still have my Rage cards. I did get rid of my Spellfire cards, so I'm sorry you can't have those.
So, thanks for your time.
Thank you very much. Have a fantastic day, everybody.
Yeah. See you all playing.
Keep on bleeding.
Yep.